Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing, I hope you're having a fantastic day. I am so excited to present today's video to you. We are going to be reviewing the top 10 most hated enemies in Elden Ring today, as voted by you. I'll also be giving you some hints and tips on how to deal with each of these enemies to help you on your journey to become the next Elden Lord. Thank you to every single person who participated in the poll that was running a few weeks ago. We had nearly 20,000 votes on this poll. And shortly after this video has gone live, if this is well received, we'll be putting a new poll live to vote for the most hated bosses and mini bosses in the game. So keep your eye out on my social media and make sure you're following on Twitter and Instagram so you can keep up to date with the latest news. Links to them will be in the description, because I would love to have even more people voting in the next one so that we can all get involved and have a true reflection of the community as a whole. Without further ado, let's jump into the 10th most hated enemy in the game. The Basilisk. Where to begin with these bastards? The basilisks are frog-eyed creatures that are able to breathe out black smoke that inflicts death on players. Stay in their fog for too long and you will become death-blighted and instantly die. A little bit of trivia for you before I get into their weakness. There is some conflicting information on the basilisks online that someone may be able to clarify for us. One description I've read for them that appears to be taken from somewhere in-game, though I haven't found it myself, says frog-like creatures with abnormally large eyes, often found underground. They ambush their prey by blowing mist that can kill any who stand in it. However, there's also a little bit of trivia on the Elden Ring wiki that says that these big eyes are fake, and their real ones are slightly above their mouths and are actually really small. Also, they're a returning enemy from the Dark Souls series. So is this confirmation that Elden Ring is set in the same world as Dark Souls? As much as we all collectively loathe these guys, they're very interesting, and they're such a unique enemy design. Now, on to how to deal with them. If you want to go purely by their weaknesses, then you want fire and slashing damage. They're incredibly resistant to most status effects, such as poison and rot, etc. However, frost is pretty effective, but their biggest weakness by far is slashing weapons, with 40% extra damage taken from all slashing weapons. They also take an extra 20% from magic, fire, lightning, and holy. So if you can apply that element on any slashing weapon, you can take these guys down in no time at all. Obviously, the preferred approach is hitting them from afar, because the further away from them you are, the less chance you're going to get caught in the death fog. Now that you've got a few tools in your arsenal to deal with the basilisks, we'll move on to the 9th most hated enemy in Elden Ring. The Chariots. There are 3 places in the game where you will encounter the chariots, and in 2 of these 3 places they are actually killable. There is one that you've just seen the aftermath of me defeating here, in the Fringe Folk Hero's Grave. This is right at the very start of the game, and after dodging it throughout a large portion of this dungeon, defeating a few optional bosses and doing a lot of platforming, you will actually be above the chariot, and you can shoot down these giant exploding magic pots to blow it up. The other cave where they're destroyable is in the Orissa Hero's Grave, and the one where you're just going to have to deal with them. And personally for me, the worst one where I died the most was in Gelmir Hero's Grave, which I've just recently covered in a Things You Missed video. So hopefully that video will help you out with tackling the only area in the game where the chariots aren't killable. There's not much more to say on them, apart from take your time, learn the pathing, learn all the hidey holes, and good luck. I can see why these are in the top 10. I also hate them. So now we'll move on to number 8. The sniper rifle wielding crayfish. These things were not thought up by some developer. They were molded within the fires of hell. They were invented by Beelzebub himself. Who the fuck decided these needed to exist? I hate them so much. And throughout doing my research for you, I actually found out that one of them patrolling around Rose Church and the Boiled Prawn Shack is actually a grafted scion in disguise that drops a larval tear when killed. What? I hate these things with a passion. Apparently you can stagger them when they aren't murderizing you from 50 miles away. I've heard that they're particularly weak to fire, not that I've really been able to test it out myself. The one thing I found that has worked is just put the fuckers to sleep and leave them to it. They're really susceptible to any kind of sleep. The sleep arrows, the sleep pots. Just put them to sleep and walk away. Fuck these guys. Oh. The Fanged Imps. So, most enemies on this list, the saving grace is they're few and far between. They're in a few areas in the game. They're quite avoidable. This next enemy is in every other dungeon in the whole entire game. Found in multiple dungeons and catacombs within Limgrave. They're also in the Impaler's Catacombs, the Tombsward Catacombs, the Cliffbottom Catacombs, the Windham Catacombs, the Murkwater Catacombs, the Fringe Folk Heroes Grave, the Rhodes End Catacombs, the Giant's Mountaintop Catacombs, and the Consecrating Snowfield Catacombs. And they just get stronger and stronger and stronger every single time you encounter them. And there's so many of them. They're fast, they do too much damage, they have too much health, they're erratic, you can't hit them. Oh yeah, did I forget to mention, they're immune to poison, they're immune to scarlet rot, they're immune to bleed, they're immune to frostbite, they're immune to sleep, they're immune to madness, they're immune to death blight, and they don't have a single weakness. They're resistant to holy, they're resistant to lightning, they're resistant to fire, they're resistant to magic, they're resistant to slash, they're resistant to standard physical, and they're resistant to pierce. The only weapon that deals base damage to them is anything with strike damage. They have no weakness, but at least they're not resistant to strike. What the fuck? Now, they do actually have two weaknesses. Guard counters are incredibly awesome against these guys. One guard counter will stun them, and then you can get a parry off, a riposte, sorry. And, provided you're not getting too ganked, if you can land 2 crystal darts on one of them, they will basically be charmed and start attacking their fellow imps. So, big-ass shields and crystal darts. They are your only 2 realistic options for these guys. Honestly, holy crap. Enjoy your time with the Fanged Imps now that you have these tools. Hopefully it will make it a little bit better for you. Good luck. And with that, we'll move on to the 6th most hated enemy in the game, as voted by you. The Revenants. Now we come on to my number 1 most hated enemy in the game. They are resistant to most status effects. It's not worth trying to bleed them, frost them, scarlet rot them, poison them. The only resistance they have is a 10% resistance to slashing damage, and the only weakness they have is a 40% increase in damage with any holy damage. They are incredibly weak to healing incantations. If you have the AoE heal, greater heal, etc., apparently it will instantly stun them and deal massive damage. I don't know how anyone ever manages to pull this off though, because every time I try and cast a heal spell, they interrupt me before the animation finishes. So for the most part, I basically just try and dodge roll around them and slash whenever there's openings. Even guard counters are really hard to pull off because they have crazy long combos when they're dealing their attacks. Luckily, they're very few and far between, because for the most part, I would say just avoid these motherfuckers. Later on in the game, when we get to the Shaded Castle, and even more so when we get to the Halig Tree, it's going to be a challenge. There's a lot of them there. So apart from just being incredibly skilled at this game, or using holy and healing spells, good luck. Good luck with these motherfuckers. Also, listen to the description for them. An obscene and disturbing abomination. Blend of a spider-like creature and human limbs, resulting in a quite resourceful fighter at close range. Obscene and disturbing. You got that right. Enough talking about these guys. I hate them. Let's move on to the next one. The Finger Creepers. Ooh, these guys give me the creeps. Their name is not wrong. I think the 2 main things that make these guys so awful to fight is you rarely ever fight them one-on-one, and there's a lot of them ready to ambush you in the areas where they're abundant. The only 2 damage types where they take significantly more damage that it's worth calling out is slashing and fire. So if you have that combination, you'll be absolutely sorted. Just make sure, I'm not sure how many people know this, that when you first attack them with a fire attack, don't continue hitting them. Hit them once and let that animation finish before you hit them again. They take a significant amount of damage the first time they're set on fire and they're rolling around, and that damage will continue to tick. There's a damage over time, but that dot will only stay as long as you don't interrupt the animation by hitting them again, and it's impossible to do that twice. So you basically want to make sure you get off 1 fire attack on each one, leave them to roll around screaming in pain, and then hopefully by the time they come out of that animation, they'll be on low enough health that you can one-shot them. That's the biggest tip I've got for you for these guys, and it should make most of them trivial. Good luck. And now we'll move on to number 4. Dogs. just narrowly missing out on a spot in the top 3 with 4.82% of all of the votes is dogs. And no, I'm not talking about these dogs, I'm talking about these dogs. I've got a love-hate relationship with the gaming news site Rock Paper Shotgun because they try to be far too edgy and it just becomes cringe. However, they recently did an article, all of Elden Ring's horrible dogs rated, and I actually thought it was brilliant. I don't know if they thought of all these names themselves, but it was genius, and I'm going to use that article now to talk you through dogs in Elden Ring. This was a hard one to rate and review and help you with, because there are so many different types of dogs in Elden Ring, but I'll try and remember to leave a link to this article in the description, because the names they've given all the dogs and the review they've given, including the difficulty of each dog and also the repulsiveness of each dog. Honestly, I found it hilarious. So for the little tiny dogs here, and you'll see lots of variations of them, some of them covered in pustules and scarlet rot. You've also got the wolves, you've got the shaggy ones that look like terriers, you've got the scrawny skeletal ones, but they all operate basically the same. Really fast, really nimble, but also incredibly squishy. Biggest tip I can give you, again, just like the imps, is guard counters. Wait until they do their 1-2 combo and then guard counter, and you'll usually one-shot them. If not, they'll be stunned long enough for you to run up and finish them off. You just need to take your time, be very patient, be very defensive and very reactive with dogs. If you try and out-aggression them, they will usually win. Then you've got these big bad motherfuckers in collated. Again, guard counters work surprisingly well. Most of their attacks are also very easy to telegraph, so you can roll through most of their attacks. Just like with the spiders, their two biggest weaknesses are slashing damage and fire damage, and they're also really weak to sleep. One sleep pot will put them to sleep. So though they are initially big, scary, vicious, aggressive, tanky bastards, there's a lot of weaknesses you can exploit, and if you combine them all together, they shouldn't give you much trouble at all. Now, what you've all been waiting for, we're going to move on to the top 3 most hated enemies in Elden Ring as voted by the community. The Warhawks. With just 0.1% more of the votes than the dogs, just inching into third place, being some of the earliest game enemies and littered throughout Stormvale Castle. These guys can be absolutely horrible in the early game. Oh my god. I should have mentioned earlier, hopefully you've noticed, but I've deliberately been using weak weapons that I haven't leveled up, that I haven't got loads of stats in, so that even though I'm doing this video at a much higher level, you can see I'm not just cheesing them all to death in one hit. I'm still only doing like 100 damage or so, so I'm only doing a little bit more damage than you would be at this level anyway. Now that I've clarified that, my biggest tip for Warhawks is defeat them from afar. If you've got arrows, if you've got items that you can throw at them, if you use magic, just kill them before they get to you and you'll be absolutely fine. If that isn't possible, then these enemies are probably the most susceptible enemies in the game to guard counters. Just get your shield up, wait for them to clang their knife claws against you, follow up with a guard counter, and they'll instantly fall to the ground and be susceptible to die. You should two-shot them. A guard counter will take off half their health, then you can just plunging attack them to finish them off once they're writhing around on the floor. Guard counters make these guys trivial. Now, that will give you all the tools you need to defeat the ones in Stormvale. However, there is a fire-breathing variant in Farum Azula, and they are absolute bastards. The two strategies I've just given you will still work, especially the ranged strat, because if you don't have 100% fire resist shield, which I don't know if one even exists honestly, they are still going to do damage to you. But guard counters are still very effective against their melee attacks, so just get up close and personal and guard counter them to death, as you did with the ones in Stormvale, and you should be absolutely fine. We are now going to move on to the second most hated enemy in the game as voted by you. The Abductor Virgins. Where to even begin with these guys? They are literally immune to every single status effect in the game. They have no significant weaknesses either. They take 20% extra damage from lightning, however they have resistances against pretty much all physical damage, fire, and holy. However, when their main body is closed up and protected by the outer metal shell, them weaknesses really don't count for much because they still take next to no damage. What I'm attempting to show you here is to basically just dodge their attacks as efficiently and as effectively as possible, and then as they open up their chests to come in to grab you, roll into them, roll through the arms, and you should be able to get off a few slashes at their innards, which deals critical damage and will quickly build up their poise meter because they can be poise broken. You can't riposte them, you can't visceral them when they are poise broken, but it will expose the weak spot and you can wail on them and hopefully get them killed in one cycle. That is a lot easier said than done though. Their attacks are so sporadic and it's very hard to consistently get them to open that weak spot. A lot of this fight will just be you dancing around and praying you're not getting hit again and again and again by their plethora of horrible attacks. That's all the advice I have for these enemies. Good luck. And now, what you've all been waiting for. We're coming onto the most hated enemy in Elden Ring. Of the 90 enemies on this list, it got a whopping 6.2% of the votes, with nearly 1,200 votes total. It is the Rune Bear. Oh, the Rune Bears. Where to begin with the Rune Bears? They are one of the quickest enemies in the game despite their size. Horse combat is very ill-advised. They will run faster than your horse, they will knock you off, they will most likely kill your horse, and then you'll be left vulnerable. They're practically immune to frost and bleed, and also very resistant to poison and scarlet rot. They take 20% extra damage from fire and 10% extra damage from slashing. So just like with the dogs and the finger creepers, a slashing blade with a fire elemental is about the only way to deal increased damage to these guys. They can be poise broken, so my recommendation is a big slashing sword with fire damage and jumping attacks. Just like with the Revenants, a lot of this fight will be a dance. You just want to keep rolling around them, play it very passively, and just look for an opening to get off a jumping attack. If you've managed to get 2 jumping attacks in quick succession, ramp up the aggression because they will be close to being staggered. But if you leave it too long, that poise meter will lower and then they won't be staggered. This really is an enemy though, where practice makes perfect. They aren't bullshit. They don't have any really unfair attacks. They're just really fast, really strong, really powerful, really big, really tanky, and it's going to require you becoming an absolutely solid Elden Ring player. And once you figure out how to take them down, you will feel like a god. There's a reason these were voted the most hated enemies in Elden Ring, and it's because they're not bullshit, and there's no good way to cheese them. They're just really strong enemies that really push your limits as a player. So with the right build, the right amount of patience and skill, eventually I know you will overcome the Rune Bears. And that's it. We've covered all 10 of the most hated enemies in the game. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the channel and chucking me a like. If you could share this far and wide, we're so close to 100,000 subscribers. It is insane. So close to becoming verified, and anything you could do to help promote this channel would mean the absolute world to me. Let me know if you'd like me to do this again for bosses and mini bosses. I'm already so excited to bring that one to you if it is something you want to see. And with that, all I have left to say is I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.